Hello, everybody. This is Bruce Belfiore, CEO of BenchmarkPortal, and this is an episode of CallTalk video. And we just had a great CallTalk episode with Christine Canine, CEO of Higher Image LLC, a certified WBE. She's been in that position for the past 16 years, and her company is nationally accredited, specializing in background screening and drug testing. She's the past chair of the Professional Background Screeners Association and active with SHRM at both the national and local levels. So Christine's a frequent speaker at events throughout the country, and she has been on with us twice before for CallTalk. So we're just delighted to have you back.
Thanks for having me.
Yes. Okay, great. Well, I understand you recently had a conversation about hiring insights with the former EEOC commissioner and acting chair, Victoria Lipnic. Tell us about that. It's fascinating.
Yeah. Former Chair Lipnic, she was on my webinar quarterly series, and she said, you know what, really for employers to be aware over this next, under the Biden administration, they're really looking at big data and how does that impact employers and how are they using it and could it add to systemic racism? And you don't really think about it, but some of the examples she gave is, so employers, especially your contact centers, they're trying to hire people fast, right? So they're going through assessments and application questions and trying to weed out the bad resumes, keep the good ones in. And what she said is, what if that big data is, excluding certain zip codes that might exclude certain minorities that could have an unintended bias to it? And the Biden administration is definitely looking at that. So the big takeaway for me is, employers need to know where that data is coming from, the tools they're using. It's important to know what's in those algorithms, what is weeding out those, quote unquote bad resumes, just to know how it's being used.
Excellent. No, that's important. And one of the examples we could use as a sort of an analogy is you hand everything over to your CPA for your taxes, and you might not understand everything that goes on in there because you trust him or her to be the expert. And here, but you're still on the hook at the end of the day. The same thing is true here. So this is a great point. Thank you very much for making it to our audience. Yeah. And also with the renewed focus on criminal justice reform and equity for all, does the background screening get looked at a little less favorably than in the past?
Yes, I'd say unfortunately, yes, in some respect, when legislators get involved and they're figuring out laws because sometimes they think it's going to help folks, but it really puts employers in between a rock and a hard place, right? They want to hire the best people. They have to ensure their workplace and their communities are safe. And they're not necessarily opposed to hiring those who are formally involved with the criminal justice system, but there has to be a balance, right? So, and I think us as a society can all agree we have to get those folks back to work and the ways to do it. So through my work, not my work with SHRM, but SHRM does have a getting talent back to work. They have a whole website about it and a certification about it. So those of you who are interested in hiring the formerly incarcerated, there's programs out there, and I encourage you to take a look. But it's also just a tricky situation. I'm always watching on the news of folks who are committing these crimes, especially we're seeing so much more lately of workplace shootings. And a lot of these folks have prior records. There was just a recent Bureau of Justice studies that came out from 2005. They looked at state prisoners, probably about 500,000 of them, and over 80% reoffended or committed another crime within a 9-year period. So employers have kind of a right to know, right, who's been formally convicted of a crime and how to use that information. The EEOC had come out with guidance back in 2012. I encourage employers to use that. But again, legislators who are coming up with laws need to understand there's the other flip side of the coin. Like any other policy issue, right? There's just so much to look at.
Sure. Yeah, these can be really tough issues. And thank you for sharing that SHRM resource too. That could be very useful to some of our listeners. You mentioned the background screening at locations. Now that the pandemic has ushered in a new remote workforce, how does that impact the hiring process from your viewpoint?
That's another great question. And just like I started off with, that employers have to know where their data is coming from and how they're using it, I'll just start off also saying you have to understand how you're using your information with background checks and what authorizations and disclosures and notifications you're using. And the reason I'm saying that is now, especially with the remote workforce, right? You may have to, maybe you're working in one state, but now you're hiring remote people in different states, different cities, different counties. They all may have different, just like different employment laws, same with the background screening and the drug screening might have different laws. So employers have to be aware and you have to follow them. It's up to you to know what those local laws are where folks are working. So definitely want to call out California and New York as being one of the tougher ones. Really pay attention, but there's a lot of them out there that employers have to be careful of. So with that remote workforce, definitely want to see there's special laws to follow.
Interesting. Okay, thank you. And now one of the things we always talk about is marijuana again. And
yes.
So what do employers need to know as an update? Because there's been so much in the news lately.
Yeah, so this was like record-breaking election year where marijuana was on the ballot box this past November, and it passed overwhelmingly in most places. And I think that trend's not stopping. We're going to continue to see the legalization of recreational marijuana, the expansion of use of medical marijuana. So employers have to be aware of what the laws and the rules are in their states. Especially want to call out Philadelphia as of January 2022, you can no longer test for pre-employment. Marijuana cannot be part of your pre-employment testing. That is also now currently the law in New York City and Nevada. Employers cannot test for marijuana. So really want to pay attention to that. What we're seeing is a lot of employers are just starting to remove marijuana from the testing panels if they don't have regulated industries or they don't have safety sensitive positions. So a lot of contact centers, I know sometimes there's contractual obligations, so it might be time to talk to clients and say, hey, do we still have to test for marijuana? Because it does become somewhat of a headache with all of these laws. So something to be aware of.
Right. Okay. And one last thing, Christine, can employers require employees to get the COVID-19 vaccine before coming back to work?
Another great question, and we hear that question quite a bit. And, the EEOC has even weighed in on that, and they have guidance on their website. So feel free to go out there and check it out. But basically, the answer is, usually it's not yes for employers, right? But yes, in this case, you can require your employees who are coming back to the office or applicants coming in to have their COVID-19 vaccine. However, what you got to be aware of is the American with Disabilities Act, because under ADA, you might have to offer an accommodation. If someone for religious or medical reasons might not be able to get the COVID-19 vaccine, so then you may have to work with them, to accommodate. So maybe they might have to be the folks that work from home and then maybe not requiring it of them. So a little tricky, but overall, yes, but be aware.
That's great. Well, listen, thank you so much. We'll end it there, but really appreciate your input.
All right, sounds good. It was so nice to be with you again, Bruce, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Okay, very good.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.